Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Courage Talks. Special guest today is Devi Money. She's got more than 2 decades in corporate, and she's doing some amazingly great work in mental health space as we speak right now. And without further ado, let's welcome Devi.
Thank you so much, Hetal. It's lovely to be here. Very grateful that you reached out to me to the running group, and here we are.
Pleasure is mine. I hope it will be an interesting conversation. So the topic is Courage Talks, and the background story is my book Against All Odds, which is my father's biography. And when I was hearing from my dad about his life story, I realized there were multiple instances of courage, multiple instances where he had to go through tough times, and he came out very strong. What does courage mean to you?
I think courage is just the ability to move forward under all and any circumstance. And I think it changes for each of us circumstantially, honestly. I think what courage is in the face of loss, and then when I say loss in the face of loss of life, loss of
Yeah.
wealth is very, very different. But I think the will to persevere is perhaps what I would call courage, to just persevere and not give up. That's
Yeah.
what I would believe is courage. And it's something that I measure myself by as well.
That's a very interesting point you made, and I've not come across this version from anyone. Courage to be able to bear loss, which is loss of a life or loss of fortune or loss of money. Is it very different from courage to achieve something that you really desire? You think the two are different?
I think it's driven by, and I might be splitting hairs here, Hital. I think drive. You're right. Fundamentally, it's the ability to say that I will still continue, to be able to dream and say
Mhm.
that I'm going to achieve something which might or might not even seem possible at seed stage, at the idea stage. The courage to think big, to say that, I'm going to think larger than what seems realistically possible. I don't believe it's very different. Fundamentally, it's the ability to put that one foot ahead of the other end. You know what that is. You're a runner. Do
That's
nothing
true.
more than just
Yeah,
put one foot ahead the other and say, this is my next step,
correct.
and I will not go back.
Yeah. No, I think if I was supposed to extend the running analogy, my ability to configure my next run versus my regret on a DNF in the current run, they both have a very different situation, but probably it recalls the same level of feelings, or it requires the same level of analysis in my mind to make myself feel at ease on the circumstances, both
Yeah.
of them. Somewhere from a psychology perspective, I don't know if I can correlate with whether it's just saying that, right? You regret more about the 100 rupees in your wallet, which is gone, than the 100 rupees which you were expecting and you didn't get,
True.
having got there. So I think from that perspective, losing someone who you had a very strong feeling of possession versus trying to gain something which you are not even sure about getting probably would be a much tougher task as well.
Absolutely. It's loss, like you said, of something that
Yeah,
you had
that's right.
versus loss of something that you
Yeah,
didn't get. You're right. It's a very different thing. But I still believe that, and when I look at different generations of people that we work with in the
yeah,
mental health space, that's what
yeah,
is so different from, let's say, the Gen Z versus or rather the new generation versus people like you and I, where to be able to put that one foot ahead of the other and say, I don't know what is 3 steps ahead. I don't know what is 30 steps ahead. And I certainly don't know what is 300 steps ahead, but I know that I'm going to take the next step, is very, very important. I come back to analogies of sport where you actually step in saying, I don't know how this is going to end, honestly. And you just step in and
yeah,
you go every morning. I mean, for all of us who run, you get up in the morning and you go. There are people who are better than I who say, come injury, come rain, come sunshine, I will still go. And then there are ones like me who say, I'm going to take it easy given my health and my age, etc.
yeah.
Either which ways, you make
Hmm.
your choices. I'm all for it, but take that step.
That's true. Who's your role model for courage? Whom would you look up at as an example of
So
courage?
many people. I think the layperson, I don't have any, I mean, there are heroes, of course, but I think they're layperson. And I come from a very small town called Vellore. That's home for me. I'm not ancestrally from there, but I grew up there. And if you
Hmm.
look at the average person in working in the medical space in Vellore, I've seen people who have willingly gone and said, we're going to do God's work in a place like Africa when it was Ebola struck, knowing full well that they're not going to come back. But they said,
Yeah.
this work is needed, so we will do what is required. The layperson, that's a heroic story. But a couple of years back, I think this was 2 years back, at the Bangalore Lit Fest, this gentleman called Ashok Alexander released a book called Where the I have a couple of copies of it. I actually bought 10 so I could keep gifting it to people. It's
Wow.
called the How the Light Gets In. It's about the average
Okay.
woman. He said the tenacity of a woman who has a child to survive and make her child survive is shocking. He said, I'm shocked by
Yeah.
how much these women will go through to make sure that their child has one more day on earth. Those are stories of, you just look at the layperson fighting against all odds and you say that is real courage. You don't have to look for a heroic story somewhere. It's in front of our eyes in our streets. And I live in Koromangla, and Ijipura is a couple of lanes away. There are daily stories of courage that we can see if we want to take the time out to go and really
Yeah.
watch.
You mentioned growing up in Vellore. So how was it like? What are a few memories of childhood will still remain with you? What's the oldest possible memory you have about Devi?
Oh, my memory goes back a very
Lady
long
Devi.
way. I spent my first few years in Ajmer actually, so I remember from there. But Vellore for me specifically,
Hmm.
since you asked, is our sunshine years. For me, in those years, the sun shone brightly. There was very little rain, which is also
Yeah.
literal because it doesn't rain much in Vellore. But cloudy days, I had an amazing childhood out there. Initially, I used to wonder why a lot of people said their teen years were bad because I think those were my best years. I had a great set of friends. The environment was very, very nurturing. And given that the school I studied in is associated with CMC Vellore, the whole philosophy that we grew up in was to give. Very, very charity oriented philosophy that sort of was drilled into you on a daily basis with a very solid religious backing. So, you kind of
Yeah.
learned to do for more than just yourself. You learned that you actually did for others before you did for yourself. I think that was the basic life philosophy that we were all brought up with. That's the most serious side of it. The place was liberal, it was full of books, it was a lot of learning, it was a lot of sports, it was a lot of friends, it was a lot of fun.
The school reminds me of the anecdote that you mentioned. One of your teachers talked about the importance of giving back to
Yeah,
the
I know.
society. Now, we are surrounded by people in 50s and 60s also don't think about giving back. And you, as a school child, was told to give back. What changed for you
So
at
I
that
should
time?
tell you the backstory of this. I did very badly in economics in grade 9, and I was essentially just fooling around. Till I wasn't taking anything seriously. I was more involved in hanging out with friends and reading books. I was being a regular 14-year-old discovered boys. So my life was in my mind really full, and I'd done quite badly in my exam. And my economics teacher, who's also my class teacher, by the way, was quite shocked because she had seen a very drastic change. And while she'd corrected the paper, she had essentially written saying, she said, Devi, you consume so much. Have you ever thought of when you will stop consuming and start giving back? And I
Yeah.
remember I showed it to one of my closest friends. And she looked at me, she's like, my
Yeah.
God, what a guilt trip. So I was like, yeah, why would you guilt a 14-year-old for just having a good life? But I think I went back and it kind of stuck somewhere. It wasn't an aha moment or anything, Hital. I think for the first time I felt a little conscious.
Accountable?
No, I felt a little conscious. It kind of held
Okay.
me accountable to privilege. For the
Yeah.
first time, I went back, and obviously, when I was going back in the bus that day, I was like, I don't know what I'm consuming. What am I consuming? I'm just a regular girl in a house. And as I went inside, it didn't strike me then. It for many days it didn't. But I
Hmm.
did speak to my dad about it. I spoke to my father and I said, this is there. And he said, what do you think? I said, I don't know. Initially, I said, this friend of mine said, it's a bit of a guilt trip. She's guilting you. I said, I don't know, but it struck somewhere in my head. I don't feel good about it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
first thing he said. He said, you're sitting in a library in your house. He said, some people don't have a spare room to have a library. He said, you have a huge library. And that's something I've always had. He said,
Yeah.
you have the privilege of innumerable books that you carry across generations. He said, how many people have that? Go back and think of where you come from. The family, the fact
Yeah.
that you're entitled or you're being offered education to whatever level you want. You can do what you want to the extent that you
Yeah.
can get bad marks if you want. Right? He said, if that's
Hmm.
not privilege, I don't know what it is. And he said, it's a good thing for you to think about, perhaps, right? My mother was a very typical Indian mother who turned around and told me that I was starting to be the big disappointment in her life. And she did the right thing of making sure that I was
Yeah.
solidly ashamed of how I'd performed. And I was a regular teen who decided to just ignore her and her things like that. She's yelling at me and it doesn't matter. But I think this conversation kind of stuck with me. And I'm acting on it at different times. I won't say that, in the next economics exam, I aced it or anything like that. Nothing at all happened. But I think
Yeah.
that's a thought that stayed with me
Hmm.
throughout. That's a thought that I've given to my daughter as well, saying that, at some point of time, have some sort of a tab in terms of what you're consuming and what you're giving back. It's a healthy tab to keep in your mind. Make sure that you're
Yeah.
having some sort of a balance. And eventually, as you progress in life, you sort of start skewing to the right. If giving is to the left, taking is to the left and giving is to the right. Start looking for a right skew. That's a
Hmm.
good thing.
Makes sense. What was your dream growing up? And did this particular incident solidify your plans for life?
Um, that's a good question. I think I moved between dreams really. A lot of what I wanted to do was very literary when I was growing up. At some point of time, I actually thought of saying, should I do PPE and go on to be a proper political writer? Is that what I want to do? So lots of things in my mind. And I don't think I acted on any of them, Hital. I was one of those kids who sort of allowed life to carry me along. But I think the good thing that happened was wherever I land, I do a good job of it, right? I make sure that I make the best of it. I'm not someone to say that I don't like what I have, so I'm not going to work well on it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of my career path, while I've navigated it to a lot of places, when I worked at the O'Brien sales, the biggest thing that I picked up is really understanding people, right? For me, the big realization was very ironically, I discovered what performative empathy and care was when it came through hospitality. You had a whole front that
Yeah.
you had to put on because
Hmm.
it was a very different view that you had of customer. And now, right now, as I'm working with Skooc, with a auto manufacturing company, I'm able to look at it very carefully and say, okay, this is what you need to do because your customers now have a very different kind of request. Customer service now has
Yeah.
changed significantly. So as we're kind of building the ability for their NPS to stay stable and in fact improve through behavior modification for their frontline staff, I would say that sort of is
Hmm.
coming into a lot of experience for me now because hospitality and what you do for customer service is very defined by organizations like the Uproy Group.
Yeah.
Across GE,
Yeah.
IBM, etc., where it was lots of numbers, a lot of statistics and numbers that I worked with, where I
Yeah.
worked in operations stats part, and then IBM I joined in a lot of M&A work, etc. I think I learned
Hmm.
a lot of measurement and calculation to run with data, to refuse to
Yeah.
not measure anything. Right? If you don't measure it, then I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but even if it's anecdotal, it deserves to be measured and quantified somewhere. And I think moving into rewards, compensation, and benefits was actually very serendipitous. It was where I was pulled in after I came back from my maternity leave and I couldn't travel anymore because I had a very young baby who
Yeah.
was born very premature. I was actually called and said, listen, do you want to move to HR? And I was like, you couldn't get a worse person to move into HR. But they said, we're starting a compensation team and we want somebody who just wants to work with numbers. We find a lot of HR people don't want to work with Excel. So we have one girl already and we're looking
Yeah.
for the next girl or the next person. And I said, yes, that I'll take. I'll take any day. In a bit of a way, it kind of distilled down the worth of each employee to a number. It kind of taught me
Hmm.
how organizations look at people, how your material worth is defined. I'm not saying that's the only way that we measure
Yeah.
people, but at least how material worth for a person is defined and how much it affects a person's self-esteem and standing in their own
Yeah.
eyes, let alone another person's eyes, in their own eyes. Which, if I was to look, it just kind of helped me understand people in each layer and in a very quantifiable way, not just a qualitative way, but in a very quantifiable way. And that sort of helped me through the years as I'm building what I am in the mental health space. And then we work with schools as well as enterprise. We have two pillars that we work with at Skooc. In both, it's actually helping
Right.
me a lot.
The way I see your career, it looks like sorry to say, but a confused
It does, yeah,
maze.
yeah, I'm sure.
A school student who had interest in political science ends up in sales and marketing in the Oberoi group, ends up being handling operations in GE, then compensation and benefits, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Was it a lot serendipitous? Was it something that you left a lot to chance? Because I'm assuming some of these were more of inbound opportunities rather than you going around hunting in desperation. Did you let the things flow the way they were happening, or was there some strategic intent behind getting yourself exposed to a lot of organizations? And honestly, for our youngsters, that's very critical. Many times people want to get exposed without having really any clarity in terms of what that company stands for
Yeah.
or what that role
Yeah.
means.
So it's a great question you're asking. Each role that I did, Hital, I actually found an area of strength. I found that a skill that was good, that I was inherently good at, and I felt confident enough to be able to improve it. And to that extent, I've been very grateful for the kind of organizations I've worked with. They're all very good brands. I've had extremely, extremely good bosses. I think across the 23 years I've worked in corporates, I've actually
Hmm.
had just one or two bad bosses. Everybody else has been
Hmm.
superlatively good. People I'm still in touch with, people who actually still reach out and say, hey, listen, do you want to do something together when it comes to work? Or reach out and say, I was thinking of you. Shall we sort of problem solve this together, sort of thing? So I've been very
Yeah.
lucky that way. It's largely been that whenever I've been in a role, I've been able to find a skill that I've been inherently good at. I've been able to build that to a strength. And that strength has led me to the
Yeah.
next role where they said, this is going to work really well. Each role has been, while building on what I was good at already, help develop further strengths. And I completely understand what you're saying in terms of younger people wanting to do that. I don't think it's only the young. All of us want to evolve. All of us want to evolve to the
Yeah.
next best skill that we can grab and put into our little bag. Where we see apathy in a lot of corporate people now is when they don't see themselves evolving and growing.
Hmm.
It's a great question in terms of saying, so is that material or non-material? That's very
Yeah.
specific for each person to answer. But fundamentally, if you were to ask, a lot of people will say, this bar, I'm okay with material
Yeah.
possessions. I'd really like to
Yeah.
grow cognitively. I'd like to know more. I'd like to understand more, right? I'd like to be able to think
Yeah.
and perhaps even innovate more. Nothing gives you the highs like coming out with a great idea and fleshing it out. And people are still looking for that. Inherently, we're all looking for that. It
Yeah.
doesn't help that the digital environment is such that sort of is at cross purposes with what people want.
Yeah.
But I would say my career was actually built on this. I moved everywhere with someone saying, you're good at this, so, and we need a person who's good at this out here. Like the move from in IBM.
Right.
We want somebody good
Hmm.
with numbers who works with Excel
Right.
sheets. We have a role, will you come here?
I know this is coming abrupt, but did motherhood come along easily for you? I mean, you mentioned child was premature. Did you really have any compromises to make? Any particular instance during your corporate life where you felt it was really hard for you to balance work and family?
Um, Motherhood in itself was not easy for me. Hasn't been the easiest journeys, but yes, my daughter was born very premature. It was a bit of a very conscious choice that I had to make to take a step back. As a
Hmm.
person, like most women, I want it all. I want
Hmm.
it done well, and I blame myself for it not going well. When my daughter was about a year old, I was very lucky that IBM allowed me to work out of home because we were already running out of space in offices because we were growing very, very fast. So anybody who could do a job out of home was actually compensated for it. It was an incredible,
Blessing
I
in
know it
disguise.
was. And we had a fantastic CFO who did a great job of selling it to all of us because those were days when you really wanted to come to office. So I got through the first year, and it was the simplest year. I wouldn't say it was the
Hmm.
easiest, but it was the simplest year with the least number of tasks to be done to keep my daughter thriving. But I think post that, I did take
Yeah.
a break. I took a break of about a year and came back to work after that. Did I make choices that pulled me off the main path? Absolutely. A
Yeah.
big part of moving into HR was that I was never an HR person. I was always a
Hmm.
business person. It was. And did it mean that I've had to kind of temper down my ambition? Absolutely.
And no regrets about that.
I wouldn't say there are regrets. I'm at peace with the decisions I made. I did the
Yeah.
right thing. And I'm not saying I did a great job as a mother. What I realized is you can be a very present mother at home and yet struggle in parenting. Physically being at there doesn't mean you're a successful mother or you're going to have a fantastically successful child. All of us have to go through
Right.
those peaks and troughs. Your child's teen years are going to be tough. One thing that I'm very
Yeah.
glad about is that I didn't quit my job. I'm very glad that I had another outlet for all the energy that I had. I still continue to feel good about who I was. I progressed career wise. Even if I felt that I was making mistakes as a parent, I certainly felt I was progressing in a career. So that's not something I have
Yeah.
regrets about. But has it taken a hit? Absolutely, undoubtedly.
It's an interesting point that you mentioned that trying too hard to be physically present, but your mind is not there, can be worse than vice
Yeah.
versa. If you're mentally and emotionally there with your child and family, even if you're not physically present, probably that would be valued much more than just trying your way hard, bending things around just to be physically present, but your mind is clearly not there. And obviously, the child can see that as well.
One of the things, at least with my generation of parents, is that, and I see that with a lot of my colleagues, is that we became parents who wanted to control the environment around the child a lot. If that was by being physically
Mhm.
present, so be it. We wanted to control the child's hours, we wanted to control the child's workings, we had wanted to control the child's marks, their future, everything. I had a conversation with my daughter very early on. It was pre-COVID, and she was in grade 7 or 8. And I said, "Hey, listen, everybody's talking about university and stuff like that. Right? Do you want to get started on that?" And I had friends who were saying, "Do this whole psychometric test. It'll tell you what she needs to do and stuff like that." And I got her to do it, and we got it done. And somewhere through it, she actually stopped the psychometric test, and she spoke to me, and she said, "This is a whole load of crap that you paid for, right?" So I said, "Why?" She said, "None of this applies to me, Amma. Life is going to change so much. I can see it changing that I already know this doesn't apply to me. But if it makes you feel good, I'll take it." I said, "Well, I've already paid for it. Do you want to see that what comes out of it?" So she said, "I'll do it,
I
but I
know.
don't think it's worth anything at all. But I'll do it because you asked me to." But we had a very
Hmm.
good conversation after that. And I said, how do you want to take this forward? Do you want me to be involved? I said, see, one person has to be in the driver's seat. We can't all be
Yeah.
drivers. One person drives, the other person follows. If you drive, then I will be the provider, you be the driver. I'll make sure you have everything available for you. But I said, if I'm the driver, then you are not a provider, you're a follower. You be very clear about it,
Yeah.
because then you do what I say by schedule. I mean, we decide that now. Of course, we work around the whole structure of how we will engage in this. But one person has to set the path. She took a lot of time thinking about it, and she spoke a lot to her father. And she came back and she said, you know what? I'll just drive myself. I might just fall and fail, but I'm not handing over my independence and freedom to anybody for any cost. And I think that was a good conversation to have. That was a very good conversation to
Yeah.
have, because, I was beginning to see her transition from a child to a teen and then on to an adult.
Hmm.
She's 21 now. And she stayed strong with that. And it's helped me put a lot of guardrails for our relationship in place, in the sense that it's very clear that she will always be in the driving seat of her life. I have the option to respect it and be the passenger in her car, or I get to oppose it, in which case I think she's going to drive off in her car and not let me around her, which I felt for me was a great fork on the road to be at, because it made me take a very conscious decision to say, how will I therefore stay relevant in her life? And it is to be that I watch her make her mistakes and not
Yeah.
rush to correct it. Even if I can see the snowball coming from a mile away, all I can do is to say, listen, I think it's going to come and hit you. And then if she chooses to get hit, to be there as she recovers post hit. It's been a difficult journey to stand in that place, Hital. But I think
Yeah.
with the generation that we're talking about, that's the space they need. Funnily enough, I
Yeah.
think our parents gave us that. Like I said, my mother did not know what I was doing between this Sunday and the next Sunday when I was in college, because she would call me at 8 p.m. on Sunday. And she said, you better be there when I call you at 8 o'clock. So if anything happened to me, she would theoretically find out the next Sunday at 8 o'clock when I wouldn't be at the call at the phone. So for someone who was brought up with that much of freedom, I completely
Yeah.
respect the fact that my daughter wanted that space as well.
Way back in 2017, the HP disintegration did more to you than to HP. Why don't you tell us what was that conversation you had with your husband and what changed for
That's a
you?
conversation that I just wonder if I should have had at all. It was one of the post Diwali party, everybody was, we finished everything and it was just too much of noise and I get quite exhausted by large crowds. So I told my husband that I was really tired. So he said, do you want me to take you for a drive? So I said, yes, a very quiet drive, and it was anything but. So we were almost done with we diversified entirely. The two companies were separate. We were moving into integration now. And I would have to make my choice of joining HPE or HPI. I was already a director, so HP is what could hold the position of a director. HPI was a very small company, big in revenues,
Yeah.
but small in numbers. So I was like, okay, this is where I'm going. I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. I've been here for long enough. I've seen it through enough changes, and I don't think I want to be here anymore. And it was a great conversation because I was interviewing with a couple of other investment bank, with an Indian conglomerate, with a
Yeah.
reinsurance company, and a whole bunch of guys. And I think it was a great time to say, is this what I want to do? And I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I think it was a good question that India asked me, saying, if you wanted to fix something, what would it be? And I said, the kids in the country are unhealthy. It worries me because we have a child at that age, and I see her friends,
Hmm.
I see her classmates, I see her, and I worry about where this is going. So he said, do something about it, right? We're in a place where you can take
Hmm.
time off to do something about it. And he said, if you don't find it's worth your time in the next 2 years, and it could be for many reasons, you can always come back. Because at that point of time, I was 43 or 44 years old. He said, there's a lot of time for you to come back. And that's where I really started. I didn't know what to do, but I said, let's start from a very visibly unhealthy space, which is obesity and type 2 diabetes. So, metabolic conditions in children is what was worrying me. And that's where we started. And very organically, again, Hital, very much like my career, as we started working with endocrinologists and parents of children who were clinically overweight slash obese and either insulin resistant already or had already contracted type 2 diabetes, we actually had a lot of parents saying, listen, this is not what we're worried about. We're worried about the fact that our child is not feeling good. We're worried about the fact that our child doesn't have friends, is being bullied. And it very quickly moved into mental health. So we started in 2018. By 2019, we
Hmm.
were already building the mental health platform. And 2020, COVID came and it all just took off. So again, it was those conversations that we had with a lot of parents who said, I know my child is overweight. I know that's a problem. I'm aware of it because We were talking to parents who had a clinical report in their hands saying the child is going to have a disease, which is, of course, reversible, but it is a disease nonetheless, and not a very easy one. Not to have a preteen or I mean, to have a preteen or a teen who's diabetic is terrible. The child's fun bits of being able to go for a weekend out with your friends, for a birthday party, are actually restricted, or any celebration at all at home. It's controlled. Putting the child on food surveillance, which is not something that any child likes at all. But the
Yeah.
overwhelming conversation that we were having with parents is, I get all of this, but help my child feel better.
So it's interesting. Are you trying to say that what you started with was something more visible in terms of
Yes.
obesity among
Yes.
children, and what you ended up encountering were far more serious issues which were not very visible,
Yes.
but were seemingly death
Absolutely,
threatening?
absolutely. There's so many cases of self harm
Okay.
for overweight children that we saw. And all of this just came to us very incidentally. One of the things we said is that we are not going to go with dietitians, we'll always work with a therapist. We'll have nutritionists
Yeah.
telling us what to do, but let's talk about why the child is not able to stick. And it was actually the therapist who came back and said, no, I think this is way more than obesity. I see depression out here, I see self harm. And we pivoted very, very fast,
Hmm.
because what we realized is that it's going to be far more sustainable for us to be able to make a child emotionally more stable, to be able to follow their physical routines, as opposed to do the other way. Because if they're not emotionally in a greatly regulated space, they're not going to be able to do anything, let alone eating. Oftentimes eating is so much of comfort for them that if I take that comfort toy away, I'm going to have to give something else instead. It would be a device, or something else is going to come in between, because they still need to be comforted in terms of how bad they feel. So we move very
Hmm.
fast into a mental health space.
So it's very interesting that you're mentioning that it could have a larger meaning, and I don't know how widely discussed this topic is. What you are talking is the need from the parents was more towards the mental buildup of the child, for the child to be able to understand what was going on and have a sort of a positive mindset at least, or not having a too negative a mindset which might impact him or her mentally. What you described as obesity related issues could be issues related to failure, could be related to bullying, could be
Yes,
related to not getting good marks in the class. All of them invariably lead to a wrong mental state of mind, which is more harmful to the child, and the parents wanted that to be addressed. Once that is addressed, regardless of whatever issues the child faces, at least his or her mind would not be impacted, and her mind would be secure enough to be able to give time to find the right solution to whatever problem they were encountering.
absolutely. If you look at a hardware software sort of a situation, the state of your software
Yeah.
is so important, because it drives
Hmm.
a lot of how your hardware functions. And I think the state of the child's
Yeah.
mind really, really drove how they ate, how much they worked out, and how much joy they found in just hanging out with other people. Isolated, unhappy
Yeah.
children, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to paint them all with the same
Yeah.
brush. But these were children who
Yeah.
weren't feeling very good about themselves.
Hmm.
There were some children who were overweight because of genetic issues. Don't get me wrong, they were not all behavioral. Medical conditions aside, a lot of them were very clear that their social lives were impacted, their self worth was impacted. They didn't feel very good. Academic life was definitely impacted because they found it difficult to go back and study. Other edge cases, undoubtedly. 10% of the population approximately would not even fall into these situations, but the bulk of the population fell here. And very often, parents would just come back and say, all of this is, well, you're telling us all something that we know already. We know our child is in
Yeah.
danger of metabolic problems, but my child doesn't feel happy. My child is not happy. They're not feeling good about themselves. What can you do about it? And that's where we started saying, okay, let's look at saying, let's going a little more at the root cause of what is happening and why is the child eating. Culture, of course, is there. Needless to say, Hetal, we saw a very strong positive correlation between maternal obesity and a child's obesity. Typically, what the mother eats is what the child eats as well. And usually, the
Yeah.
mums
Yeah.
kind of, because they have autonomy over the kitchen, they kind of direct how everybody eats.
True.
Having said that, mothers were very open to going ahead and changing, making the changes if the child's health was compromised. They were very open to making the changes. But the fact that food had become a
Hmm.
bit of a comfort factor there for the child was something that we had
Yeah.
to change a lot.
And you obviously had a B2B version of this where you were not just approaching parents, you were approaching schools. And you encountered tough situations, especially schools where a child had committed
Yeah.
suicide. And what was the scenario like, and how did those scenarios pan out for you?
So initially, we started off as B2C, and then we went B2B, because one of the things we realized is, again, very organically, that we have children and parents, but schools play such a huge role. So one of the things we found out very
Yeah.
honestly, and any time that we've gone there at the time of a crisis, is that most schools are reactive. because mental health
Hmm.
today is a step and not a system. When crisis hits, we all improvise at that point of time. In that chaos, we start improvising and say, okay, what do we do? How do we do this, etc. The thing
Yeah.
is, mental health is not a singular event. It doesn't come in these episodic interventions. It's got to be a system, and that system really is the child, the parent, the teacher, with a good layer of your school therapists, your counselors, resources, all of those good things, right? But the fundamental
Hmm.
unit is essentially the child, the parents, and the educators. That's the system that needs to be built,
Yeah.
and that's the system that we're building here. So we're rolling this across schools now. Since last year, we've been rolling it
Yeah.
across schools, and the ecosystem is something which is very, very proactive. It kind of picks a lot of cues from the kids. We work very closely with educators, not just on helping them understand how to recognize issues in a child, but also to help them build their own mental health. So they're in a good place. Again, one of the things that came to us is how overextended the educators are as a community, perhaps singularly most overextended professional community that I've
Right.
seen. Lots more demands and
Hmm.
a world that's changing too
Yeah.
fast for them to adapt to, with not
Yeah.
enough resources. It doesn't help that the state doesn't support you as well as it should,
Hmm.
or as well as other countries
Yeah.
do. But big discovery for me is that, not that I ever doubted it, having come from a very, very close knit school, none of the schools are lacking in
Hmm.
caring people. Most of the schools, their heart is in the right place, including this suicide which happened last year. The school's heart was just out there. They were like, let's go and do everything that we can. But very fundamental things, when we walked in, they said nobody knew that the child felt this way. And we told them, saying, give us 3 hours and we will bring at least 15 people who knew that the child was going to do this. Because these are not incidents that happen in isolation. We're built to live, we're not
Yeah.
built to die. And if we've taken such a strong life ending step, it means it's been done against a lot of pain. And that pain would not have gotten
Yeah.
unnoticed or unsaid. These were a lot of things that the schools discover that people know about it, that their friends
Hmm.
know about it. It's just that you don't know what to do at that point of time, because there is no system that says this is how you respond. There is no system that says
Yeah.
if somebody is saying that if I don't get this much, I don't want to live, or if I don't get these many marks, I don't want to live. That's not a joke. That's not a manner of speaking. That's not flippant statement. It's something to be responded to because
Yeah.
somewhere there's been a thought. The other very common thing we hear is if you speak about it, they will get these thoughts, and we had to say that no, they already have these thoughts because these thoughts are everywhere, everywhere. It's better you speak about it and tell them where to get the right resources, the safest of resources, as opposed to pretending that it doesn't exist. We're seeing far better conversations on this. So schools are full of very, very well-intentioned, good, caring people, Hetal. It's just that the
Hmm.
systems are not built. The strong systems that should work in a very clear, structured, documented way so everybody is aware, it's proactive, and it's protective. That's the system that we need. It isn't there. Sometimes when you have caring without a system, it can at times just go over to the other side. It can actually be a little dangerous where you don't have a system, but you care a lot. You end up not knowing what to do.
The other B2B entity that you're reaching out to is your old friends at CHROs at big
Yes, yes.
companies and taking the HR route. My personal experience being that CHROs love more of show and tell rather than stuff which is actually impacting. They would rather go to their CXO and say, we spent so much money on so many things rather than so many people being impacted or in the process of being impacted, which is likely to be the case with initiatives like
Yeah,
yours. So, and what's been your own
it's a
experience?
great point. So one of the things I start off with very clearly is that, listen, we work in the mental health space with either helps you improve your top line, which is you bring in more revenues, or you reduce your bottom line. We
Yeah.
help you cut cost. And when we're saying cut cost, I don't mean by elimination of headcount. The idea is that you reduce
Yeah.
attrition, for example. One of the BFSIs that we're working with is actually helping reduce offer dropout rate for their campus hires. And a lot of that we work
Hmm.
on structural. There's, of course, you don't like the salary, you don't like the location, you don't like the benefits that the company gives you. And that's very directed by what's happening in your individual life. I have very little influence on that. But what's behavioral? What happens after the high of getting the offer? For the first 2 weeks, you're thrilled to bits that you've got a fantastic offer. And then what happens? Your typical thinking through that you do, saying, is this the right place to be in? Do I see myself growing here? What kind of clarity do I have? Those are, I think, conversations, that engagements that we do very well. Again, we refuse to
Hmm.
work in isolation and saying we'll only work with the employee. We work with the employee and the manager. Anonymized aggregate reports go back to the company, of course, but they're absolutely anonymized. And it's a good thing that we have our data privacy laws, which stop organizations from coming and saying, give us more data. But the idea is to really start in a world where people really don't want to interact with each other personally. They'd rather do it digitally to actually break that, to be able to understand the other
Yeah.
person better. Even if it means being able to tell you that these are some of the personas that people have. Not to say that Devi is quiet, but in the face of conflict, she'll fight. She is not going to have a flee or a fawn or a freeze response. It will be to fight. Whereas somebody, which is true, incidentally, whereas somebody who could be very verbose, very social, might actually have a fawn freeze
Hmm.
response to a conflict. And therefore, if you're going in
Yeah.
to go and give them feedback, it's important you realize what kind of response they have, because you have to be able to adjust it to that. And if you're
Yeah.
getting in freshers from straight out of college, we work with educational institutions like schools and colleges, so we know exactly how people, kids nowadays who are coming out, are so used to asymmetric communication, where I send you a text and then I wait. I don't have to see your emotions. I don't know what you're going through. For example, when I wrote to you
Yeah.
from the road where I said, hey, my trip has been extended by a day and it was not intentional at all, I, if I was to look at you, I think I would have said five more sentences to tell you exactly why I couldn't, had to move our meeting. But I got away with sending you one text, which was very limited in its explanation, but I expected you to accommodate me. Let's be honest. I think what we are finding is that as people are coming out of college, and perhaps the young adults that we have, which is, people within the 25, 26 age range still, actually come with that, which is the conversations are all asynchronous. They're all largely text. You don't have to engage and look at the emotion in the other person's eye, be able to understand their emotion and
Hmm.
respond to that emotion. I think that ability is definitely dropping. So what we're finding is a lot of managers, because it's becoming so stressful, actually move away. We do a lot of psychological safety training, especially for generation in organizations that have multi-generation leadership. Law firms, for example, are a great
Yeah.
example, where you have partners who
Yeah.
are in their 70s and 80s and you have freshers who are walking in after their college degree. And there's such a wide gap where we have a whole bunch of the middle guys saying we're walking on eggshells because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say and what not to say, which is a very unhealthy way of being, because that's just not good for the firm. But to be able
Yeah.
to work around that, that's where we work on the behavioral stuff, where we understand what the employees like, the freshers like, and then we work with the managers as well.
You mentioned that you are deeply moved by Sulekha, one of your friends who's battling cancer, and you lost your dad to cancer. And it's something which is relatable because I lost my dad to cancer as well. And the point that you mentioned was more about courage not being like a one single act, but being something which you sustain over a period of time with the same level of strength, with the same level of commitment. You want to elaborate more on what your friend is going through and what it taught
Sure.
you?
Sulekha is not my friend. Sulekha Joad is actually an award winning writer.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Uh, she's written a very beautiful book. It's called Between Two Kingdoms. Do you know
Okay.
this guy, John Batiste, who actually played at the Grammys recently? She's his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're a
okay,
couple.
okay.
And it's a very, she was diagnosed with cancer when she was 21 or something terribly young like that. And she's been battling leukemia. For me, it's just, if you read her book, I read an excerpt of her book very long back. For me, I was like, my God, look at the balls on this one to go ahead and take on life like that. So she started keeping a journal as she was going through chemotherapy, because she was so young that she didn't fit into the pediatric ward and she didn't fit into the adult ward either, because she was that crossover, this
Oh
thing,
man.
right? So she was the oldest in the
Yeah,
child
yeah.
ward. And she started keeping a journal and she started blogging, and it got a lot of followers. So New York Times reached out and said, would you do a 13-part series for us? And look at the guts on this girl. She said, I will. But you also need to give me my own show, because I'm writing for people with cancer and they can't read. So she actually forced them to give her a show, and the show won an award. Those are times when you sit and saying, it's amazing that somebody who's going through this much can think that way and say, that pushes you to pull the last 10% out of life, right? Same. I mean, you've got nothing to
Yeah.
lose really, right? So you're going to give it your all. My father, yes, I lost my father to cancer very long back. He passed on in 98.
Sorry
Thank
about that.
you. Again, huge courage, Ethan. I think he was very blunt about. We found out much later. It was already at stage 4. We were told it was a year, and I remember asking my father, saying, "Papa, what do you think about it?" And I remember he looked at me and he said, "I feel like I've been kicked by a mule, but give me a few days and I'll come around to it, and then we'll talk next steps." Which for me is, one of those things where you kind of say you move forward no matter what. And I was like, "Are you ready to talk next steps?" He said, and I remember looking at me saying, "What are the other options? We can't stay here. I can't regress. There's only one way forward. Let's talk next steps. Let's talk about what treatment's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about when treatment stops. Let's talk about what happens to your mom after this." My sister was
Hmm.
still in college. He said, I want to talk to you about a whole bunch of things about what needs to happen after this. I'm not saying there was no emotion, but he brought a certain level of groundedness to the whole thing. He was very clear about what
Hmm.
he will submit to and what he wouldn't. And I remember the last time we drove him to the hospital, my husband was like, Appa, you need help to get into the car? And he said, no, I will walk. And he just grinned at him and he said, I don't want to be caught dead in a wheelchair. He said, it's a terrible joke, but I won't be caught dead in a wheelchair. I'm going to walk in by myself. That is something that I've carried on with me in terms of saying, you don't give up. Life deals you what cards that it does, but you play. You
Yeah.
continue to play.
You are among my favorite guests on Courage Talks because of your habit of reading. You proudly declared you have what, 800
Yes,
physical
yes.
books and 100 digital books. Please don't blame me if burglars come overnight and steal.
You're welcome at any point of time.
I know you could talk a lot, but 3 or 4 top of the mind books that have really touched you, moved you, impacted you.
Too many books to mention, no? I mean, yeah,
That's why I said
I
let's
know. I think
start.
there's too many books. I'm just such a. Sometimes there were times when I'd actually wonder saying,
Don't worry, the books you leave out won't feel bad because they don't. We won't tell them.
I used to wonder oftentimes if I actually lacked a firm personality because I would just borrow things from books and fill it into myself. So let me tell you what I enjoy. One of my very close friends, and set of five, when I turned 40, she gifted me a subscription of a magazine called Granta. Grantas are quarterly, what they call a magazine, but it's actually a amalgamation of stories. I think they're at 182 or 183 now. It's the CSR initiative by the lady who is the daughter of the Tetra Pak family. And so it's a Swedish lady who does it. And she picks up some of the best stories. And I decided to collect all of them. It's like a fantastic box of treasure. You can open any book, any page, and you won't walk away with a bad read. Well, the one thing I told myself is it's easy to go and buy. So I said I will only buy secondhand. So I'll keep searching for the grantas that I don't have. And I think I used to annoy everybody with a small book where I had written down series 1 to 10, 11 to 20, the ones that I had and the ones I had to buy. So Blossoms, Bookworm,
Yeah.
these were all great places. Bookchore, these were all great places that I would keep searching and buying. So grantas are great. From books that really helped me in the last at least 10, 12 years, I struggled a lot after my father passed on and I didn't know how to move on. I somehow felt that I didn't know how to continue life. So I turned to religion first. I said, the first known and widely advocated crutch, which is religion, so I will try that. Or 2, 3 weeks of religion and that didn't work. So I tried philosophy. So I struggled a lot and I landed on this book called H is for Hawk. It's by a author called Helen MacDonald.
8.
H is for Hawk.
Okay.
Uh,
Ages for Hope. Okay.
yeah, that's a book that really helped me get out of grief. It's a very dark, sad, long book. But I think it's a good book because it's being made into a movie or a series now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I loved Being Mortal by Atul Gawande at the same time.
So I think that's a book that I liked very much. Being Mortal, I think for me was a series of steps to do. It's stuff that I said, I wish I'd known this before. But Being Mortal helped a
I
lot.
was reading while that was in the last stage. So
Right. So
it's mentally preparing.
I think Being Mortal helped a lot for when my father-in-law passed on. I'd read it a couple of times, and it helped a lot in terms of understanding where he's coming from. And my father-in-law passed on about 3 years back, and he passed on at a far more mature age, at a far more older age. So it was very easy for me to understand where he was coming from, why he was responding the way or
You
reacting.
were at a better age as
Yeah.
well, right? You were at a far.
Of course, after having seen a bunch of losses. And then, of course, there's that emotional distance as well. While I was very close to my father in law, it was nothing compared to what I was with my father. So, all of that helped. You're absolutely right. A very nice book by Nick Thompson called The Running Ground. I finished that in
Oh yeah,
December of last
I
year.
just finished it, like
Yes,
back.
yes,
Yeah.
I loved The Running Ground. I'm actually reading Co-Intelligent after you recommended that.
That's
A whole
interesting.
bunch of books, yes.
Running Ground brings me to the next topic, which is what got us together: endurance sports and high rocks. How much of your endurance sports activities help you at work and vice versa? Do you see a correlation between physical endurance and mental
Hugely.
health?
I'm struggling with plantar hiatal. I started having plantar problems on the 1st of October last year, actually, in my head. That I remember 30th September night, the evening, we went for a beer run. And by the end
Yeah.
of it, I was hobbling back home. And since then, it's been very difficult. I've had to change a lot of things. I made every mistake that everybody does, including
Mhm.
reducing the number of runs, but saying I'll do really long ones. So, the Saturday Dundies on painkillers, two Mobizox in the morning, and then take off from here, sort of thing. It's been a bit of a tough call, but on the 8th, it was one of those post Dundee breakfasts, and I was pulled aside by a couple of people and said, listen, you've got to stop. You've just got to stop doing this stuff because you're hurting yourself. I've started swimming to make up for it. But to your question, I see a huge connection between sports of any kind and
Yeah.
mental health. It's very simple, Hetal. Like to get up in the morning, go out with whoever it is that I'm doing that particular event with, and come back. I just come back happy. I'm happy to come back. Usually we do a 6 to 7 or a 7 to 8, but when I'm back, I'm in a far better shape to be able to go through the day and go through the next few days. Everybody in office also knows that I'm not in a great shape if I haven't run or gone to the gym or something for 3 to 4 days in a row. They all say, "Acha, you need to get back to the gym because you're getting into a bad mood."
We all are like this. We are all sab pagal hain. The other thing which you've been fairly open about is battling premenopause.
Yes.
And when you are battling that along with a goal for event like High Rocks and fairly demanding job at Skooc as well, does it actually help you to keep yourself busy and not worry too much about the changes that your body is going through? Or you would rather be like, go to a resort for a month and just sort things out and get your mind at peace?
I'm not somebody who thrives with inaction, unfortunately. I've had
Hmm.
to pause high rocks as well, because of a
Okay.
lot of injuries that I started having. Not a lot, a few injuries, but significant enough for me to take a
Mhm.
step back
Yeah.
and say that, okay, this is perhaps a longer journey. That's not what I thought of from
Yeah.
November of last year to March of this year, 6 months, and I'm at high rocks. And I've been very open about perimenopause and menopause because nobody talks about it. It's like the state
Hmm.
secret that women keep. And I don't know why we keep quiet about it, because when you go and speak about it to people, they say, I wish somebody had told me that this was menopause. You see, your body is just recalibrating at a biochemical level so strongly with the hormones changing and stuff like that, that you have to perhaps realize that some of your best allies are not entirely on your side anymore, and your first ally being your body. You've depended on it for
Yeah.
50
Yeah.
years and it is going to not stand by you anymore. Call it betrayal, whatever, but you've got to give it that time to transition. And I think you've got to be very deliberate about it. People speak only of hot flashes and things like that, but those are definitely symptoms, sure, but it's far more. To start with the fact that you're just tired all the time. You wake up in the morning
Mhm.
fatigued, even after 8 hours of sleep. You
Hmm.
wake up tired, and those 8 hours are very broken sleep because you're not able to sleep deeply. A whole bunch of things happen, and I'm not saying just let nature take its course, because then you will go with it unless you look at this as a
Hmm.
very serious, important event in your life that needs to be managed to bring you back to normality. When I say normality, I
Yeah.
say back to productive level of working that you'd like to be at. It's got to be very consciously and deliberately done. I truly believe that if it was a male related thing, it would have definitely been monetized. I think for women, it's all mythologized, right? That's something that I've been very open about. I have actually spoken to a whole bunch of people, including a gentleman who was writing about perimenopause, about the need to take HRT, etc., to actually at least have that
Yeah.
conversation. Choose not to take the medication if you're not for it. That's entirely a person's right to prerogative, but have that conversation to realize what happens, because you don't have to live with a frozen shoulder for 2 years like I did. You don't have to wonder why at 3 o'clock in the middle of meetings all you want to do is sleep. That your body is not going to metabolize carbohydrates the way that it did before. The fact that you're going to
Hmm.
eat a lot, you're going to be thinking about eating all the time because your satiety hormone is down. So you think about eating all the time. So there is a reason that women in their late 40s, early 50s start putting on a lot of weight, because that hormone, which kind of ghrelin, which said you're satiated, you can stop eating now, has dropped. So you don't know, old signs of satiety are gone. Your insulin levels are low. So you're going to start having resistance increases. You will start. You're far more at risk of contracting diabetes. These are not conversations that we're having openly to all women, saying, hey, listen, you need to think about this. I find that it's
Hmm.
still very happenstance. बात कर लिए तो you found out about it, sort of thing, right? And it's very unfortunate because there are startups which have come up in this place and they haven't been very successful, unfortunately. It's definitely recognized as a problem, but I don't think it's seen as a risk or problem big enough to invest individual money. From a B2C perspective, I don't think anybody's bothered. And B2B, though, it doesn't matter really for a company, right?
You proudly declare yourself as feminist, and you feel that there is more. voice needed. You want to elaborate more in terms of what's exactly your stand there, and what is it that you think that needs to be
I
changed?
don't, okay, so I don't think it's a niche. It isn't a stance or a philosophy that I live by. But I think it's a fundamental position that all gender, you,
Hmm.
me, should be regardless of gender. It should be completely all our various gender identities agnostic. That we all just deserve equal
Yeah.
respect and opportunity and agency. I think that's what upsets me the most, the fact that people that don't have the respect also lose the agency. And I think that this whole feminism thing is a word that gets reduced. It gets reduced to workplace equity, the cost of domestic labor, the cost of domestic,
Because that's where you can put up posts on LinkedIn.
unfortunately, to a political position. And I think as you reduce it, it is seen as a right that is not deserved. A lot of questions about saying why is there affirmative action and stuff like that. But at its core, it's no different from saying that all races are equal. We're just saying that all gender needs to be equal as well. And
Yeah.
let potential not be capped by gender. A couple of VCs came and spoke, for example, and they said, one of them actually very openly said, you need to have a male co-founder. And I said, I haven't found somebody who I think on the same lines with. And so I said, but why do you need a male co-founder? I mean, why do you feel the need? And he said, oh,
Uh,
women have families, they can leave at any time. I said, there are studies that say that we don't leave spouses who are definitely dying. And 70% of men leave their wives who are terminally ill. I said, we stand by abuse. We don't
yeah.
walk away. Then what makes you think I will walk away from a thriving company? I said, as a gender, we're so conditioned to not walk away. And you think that's something I'm going to do? I said, well, you have a right to your views, but I haven't found someone who aligns with me that way. Unfortunately, I am what you get with the company. So I think it's being reduced to in multiple places. If it can be broadened and made into a situation that all of us own.
Let me ask you this question, direct. Okay, are you of the belief that Women's Day should be celebrated for women, or are you of the belief that Women's Day should not be celebrated because all 365 days are Women's Days?
I think it should be celebrated. I'm absolutely of the thought that it should be celebrated because I'm an insignificant population of extremely privileged. I don't
So
matter.
the people who are celebrating, they are like, okay, why are you hyping it up? Why don't you allow women's position in the society or in the work to get normalized and make it as normal rather than hyping it up and saying, oh, let's celebrate Women's Day?
Honestly, Hital, I think women who are not represented at all deserve that one day. I wouldn't,
The
yeah.
problem is that Women's Day celebration never reaches to these
Absolutely.
people, these
Absolutely,
particular
man.
people.
It's one perfunctory day that we speak about. Why
Yeah,
begrudge women who don't have a voice
yeah.
that day? But
The CHRO who's celebrating Women's Day in her office and putting posts on LinkedIn never had a problem being a woman anyway in the first place.
Hital, all women have problems. I refuse to believe that. I don't believe there is
In
a
the sense,
single
it's
woman who's
not
not
the
had a
not the
problem.
nature of problem which it's not the nature of problem which you would want to get highlighted, or maybe it's not to that degree.
Why not? Why be problem comparing? Drowning is
Hmm.
drowning, no? 6 feet, 3 feet, what's the difference? I feel my problems as a woman are far important. I'm not saying that I don't have a comparison, but well, let's look at it very
Yeah.
simply, Hital. I doubt if, let me say this. I don't think there is a single girl in my class, in my cohort, through school and college, who hasn't faced male harassment in a town bus, in a train, lines, etc. I'm in a place where I'm grateful that my daughter has not faced that level of harassment. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I don't know about environment, coverage, protectionism, all of that. Women
Hmm.
face problems every day, everywhere, in ways that I don't believe I think it's just innumerable to list. And I'm not talking about biases in medicine trials and all. Those are all very high things. Starting from the fact that
Yeah.
you don't have enough loose on the road to leave yourself. You don't have places that you can change if you're at a particularly vulnerable time of your month. My whole point is that even that CHRO who's putting up posts has definitely suffered. If you ask her, she'll tell you 10 ways that she's struggling. I think it's the number of problems that you have. Some of them face it all, some of us face a portion of it, but we all face it.
And you're saying that just because someone is not talking doesn't mean that someone has not gone through that. Don't believe that. Don't
I
assume that.
don't think, I
Not
think it's
everyone is
indignation,
going
no,
to go
Hital?
around talking about
Indignation comes in many
it.
ways, unfortunately. So if you see a writer like Chimamanda who wrote, We Should All Be Feminists, spoke of it in very, very rational, logical terms. And then if you look at Roxane
Yeah.
Gay, she's angry. She's angry. And we all, at the end of the day, I think we apply this when we work with parents of children in therapy. We say all behavior is a form of communication. They're trying to tell you something. You might not agree with it. You might not agree with the mode. You might not agree with the message. but the attempt is to tell you
Hmm.
something. And usually,
Yeah.
anger, if there is anger, is usually a form of helplessness. You're so upset that you don't have a way out that you turn into anger. A lot
Yeah.
of this comes from different places of just feeling helpless.
As a part of mission for Skook, you talk about impacting not a million but a billion
Yes.
lives. And is it because of the gravity of the problem and not being recognized to that level? Or is it because you feel that the topic needs the importance which will probably get if you talk about a billion lives rather than which part is the
So a lot of it is the second part, but I think a more fundamental thing, Hital, and the reason I chose a billion as the word is it isn't just a tagline, it's to highlight a design constraint. The solution cannot be what it is today, which is each of us depend on a therapist at a particular period of time. Right now, our availability, let's look at a serious edge case problem, like a disorder. Our gap is essentially zero point 0.3 psychiatrists to 100,000 people. So the reason I said a billion is to make sure that I am being very, as an organization, Skooc is very conscious about the design. We
yeah.
have to be a tech forward company. And I'm not saying tech led, human led, but a tech forward company because everybody should get support at a rate that they're able to afford when they want it, at least basic help. It's important to be very, very conscious and vocal about the fact that help comes in many forms because problems come at various severities, and we should be able to give people help immediately. It shouldn't be a situation where, like a conversation I had with a few women who were saying that I'm in menopause and I think I have to end my marriage, to be able to say that, let me tell you of the things that happen to you from a mental health perspective as you're going through menopause, which will end up making you either quit your job or walk out of your marriage because you're looking at fixing some things that you wanted to fix long back and still haven't been fixed. That's more of a psychological construct. We don't have to wait for them to go
Yeah.
through all of that. This is a resource that should be available. And I'm talking women here, menopausal women, which is a more small percentage. The wider percentage of people who are going through anxiety and depression, which is, so again, gender agnostic, 50+% of our population are going through it. I don't think we should be waiting for a particular person to be available at a particular time and then say can't afford it. And reach out to something like ChatGPT, which is not going to give you very specific
Yeah.
help that you need. There's a difference between giving you information and working with you therapeutically to be able to come through to the other side. That's one of the big reasons that I said a billion, because going at the current rate, which is to go and say book a session with a therapist, is not going to
Yeah.
solve the problem from a scalability perspective.
What is a question that you are still seeking an answer to?
The big question that I look at when I, and right now I'm working, come 1st of June, we'll actually roll out across multiple schools in tier 2 cities. There are some metros, but there's a large rollout that's happening in tier 2 cities. A big question that I ask myself saying as we're rolling out is how do I make this parent feel better about parenting today? How do I make this child get up in the morning and feel good about saying, today's a good day, I think I can handle? Because I think that's a very fundamental change we're seeing. A lot of children, when I say children, I mean teens and young adults, actually wake up in the morning saying, I don't think today is going to be a good day, or I don't know how I'm going to handle this day. In all formats, Hetal, we live in safer times. We have lesser deaths than we used to. We live in medically advanced times. We live in technologically advanced times. We live in times in certain spaces of great excess. And if at that time
Yeah.
you say that you don't have the resources to be able to say that today is a day that I can safely traverse through successfully, then I think we have a problem. That's a big question that I say, how do I make anybody who's using our product or our service to get up and say, today is a day I can take on?
What is an advice which you are glad you did not follow?
I'm glad I didn't follow the advice to marry safe.
You?
Marry,
Sorry?
make a safe choice when it came to marriage. Married a man who I met on a bus.
Very interesting. Okay, now comes the favorite part. What's a question that you have for me?
Where do you see courage talks going?
Courage Talks is likely to be going more in a philosophical direction, if I may say. It is broadening up avenues for people to look at their life very differently, look at things around them very differently, and look at themselves very differently. And it's right, that saying goes right. The moment you change the way you see the world around you
Yeah.
changes. And I think that's where the courage comes in, because you tend to believe that you are static and the world is changing, and you expect that some point of time the world would change to a stage where it would become easy for you to do what you want to, and then you'll
Yeah.
do it. But the fact is that the world is not waiting for you to change. The world is not your slave. World does things, or things happen in the world at its own pace. You might be lucky in times that you might wait for the right moment and the right moment might come to you, but the real people who succeed in life are the ones who really make things amenable enough for themselves and make the most of the opportunities given rather than trying to seek the best opportunity. And I think that's where I've kind of consciously tried to diversify the audience of the guests that I get as well, because I didn't want to get cliched, especially coming from a ultra running, endurance running
Yeah.
background. I didn't want people to get overawed by associating courage with endurance
Yeah.
running, which is just one element. And in conversation like the one I've had with you is more important to dig deeper and focus towards what you can do rather than worrying about what you can't. And when you think about what you can do, there's a lot you could do without sitting and regretting on what you can't do, which probably is all a matter of time, that you can't do it right now because the environment is not allowing or the ecosystem is not right, or maybe your stars are not
Yeah.
aligned. You can always do that sometime later.
Very nice.
Yeah. Thanks a lot,
Not
Devi.
at
It's
all.
been very inspiring to hear about your story and the fantastic work that you're doing. Carry forward the good stuff and probably take it to greater heights, and maybe you'll achieve that billion dream very
Thank
soon.
you. Thank you. And I hope you come by to the library at some point of time. Yeah.
Done.
See
Thank you
you.
very
Bye
much.
bye.
Bye bye.